Hello, everyone. Joining you today are Emily Reifsnyder and Alex Eggleston, your hosts of the Into the Darkroom podcast. On our show, we bring in guests to discuss the arts and gain a new perspective on what it's like outside of the school curriculum. Joining us today is Len DeLessio. Len has worked with major recording labels and music magazines, and his career specialties have included performance photography, portraiture, fashion, photo illustration, special effects, nature photography, and still life for magazines, corporations, and advertising agencies. Yeah, I'll let Alex take it away.
I think one question that I had was about your more recent color photography work. What draws you to the colors that you've been using?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that as digital artists, RGB is the way we work, and it's not new. All color films are based on that same principle. They're based on RGB, and they're either developed as a negative or they're developed as a positive, a reversal. They're developed as a slide, but it's always been RGB. And in fact, so is television. Color television from the very beginning, as far as I know, has always been red, green, and blue. And then when Photoshop came along, they tried to make it as close to real photography as they could make it. And that it meant like the basics of like the mode that you usually work in Photoshop is RGB as opposed to CMYK, which is for printing on a printing press with ink. That's ink colors. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other modes and color spaces. But I decided to go to just play with those colors. I mean, they're part of everything, but and they're in every picture that I take. But why not just take pictures of it? Why not just make it those three colors? And I already had those lights that I mentioned. And what they do is you can dial in a specific color, or what I've chose to do is to dial in those pure red, pure green, and pure blue. And the one thing with LED technology is the colors, the colors are more saturated and purer than if you took a continuous light like a hot light or any kind of a bulb and put a filter in front of it. The LED colors are much more specific. In other words, they don't have to filter a color; they generate the color. So since I had these lights, and I always have to do something, I can't not do anything. So it's like, oh well, you know what? I have like a whole day. I think I'll set this up, and put the cubes in there, or whatever, and aim the lights and see what happens. And that's why I'm doing that. It's not like I'm out looking for those colors. I'm actually making them. Okay. And then the other thing I did was, and that's what these lights do, is you can set them to circle through or cycle through all 255 colors, because like digital, it's like if you look in Photoshop, there's 256 levels in the histogram. You can cycle through 255 colors on each one separately and then make them so that they're not hitting at the same time, time them in a different way. And that's where I got that cycling color thing that I was using as an NFT, which is it's one of the things I said, I'm going to do one. I'm going to find out how to do it, and I'm going to do it. And I don't care if it's not real, and if no one ever buys it, I don't really care, because I can then tell people, "Oh, I minted my first NFT." And it's like, oh wow, he's really up on things. It's like, anything? What else did you want to know? You had like a whole list. Let's figure it out.
I mean, something that I always find interesting, like you had mentioned before when you were speaking about like how you got into like doing the type of photography you're into. And you've mentioned SVA a couple times, and something that always interests me is how people make the transition from just being a photographer to wanting to teach other people how to do photography. So I was kind of curious about like what that was for you.
Well, I've always been in situations where people, as a father and a grandparent, I've always been in situations where I'm teaching people what to do. So now, before I taught at SVA, I was working for one particular client who taught at Hofstra University out on Long Island. And I was just curious, and I said to him, how do you like that? And he says, oh, I love it. It's great. You're working with people who are not just younger, but they're fresher and they want to know everything, and they force you to remember what you know or things that you've even forgotten, and then they teach you things that they want to know. They force you to learn with them. So it's a give and take, and it's an exploration all on its own. So having been a student at SVA, I wanted to teach there, and I approached the head of the department, who I had kept in touch with. So this is something also as advice, is to keep in touch with everybody who you've had here as a teacher, because you never know where the opportunities will arise, or you just need help. And I have that same situation that happens at school, where I have students, even students that graduated many years ago, who will contact me and say, "Oh, how did we do this?" They'll ask me a certain technique, and of course I'll be happy to tell them how it worked. But there were no teaching jobs open at SVA at the time. So I was teaching. I ended up going out to Hofstra. This client of mine contacted me and said, "Oh, you know what? If you're interested in teaching, the head of the photo department here is taking a sabbatical, and they'll need somebody who knows how to mix chemistry and align enlargers and do all of the things." And so I went out there, I interviewed, I showed them my work. They came and looked at my studio. I had a studio in the city. And they said, "Oh, well, it's obvious you can run things and all that." And so they gave me the position they made me an assistant professor. I didn't have a degree. I left SVA before I graduated.
Oh, really?
So I didn't even have a degree. So just based on my accomplishments, they made me an assistant professor. Mm-hmm. So after a few years teaching there, the head of the department, a woman named Alice Beck-Odette, who Eric also knows, and we adore this woman. At the time, she was the chairperson, and she called me on the week before Labor Day in 1985 and said, "One of our studio teachers is not coming back. Do you want the job? You start next Friday." So I said, "Okay, I'll take it." and then I've been there ever since. So I went from teaching one class to now I teach 3 studio classes, and I was for a while teaching workshops and also a continuing ed class for a while, but I kind of gave that up. But I have the 3 studio classes, and it's just a matter of, and that also changes every year. I redo my whole syllabus every year to freshen everything up, because things, how often things change. But it's very satisfying, and at the end of the day, I know why I'm tired. Because people have asked me 1,000 questions, and I answered 1,000 questions, and I love it. It's like, whatever you want to know, that's what I'm going to tell people. Yeah. Was that good? Was that what you wanted?
Yeah.
I thought so. So I always wonder, well, did I answer the question? Because sometimes I go off like somewhere else with my description about things. So that's always something that I have to be aware of, because all of a sudden I'm talking about grandchildren and cheer and cats.
No, I feel like that's the best way to do things, though, because I always love just seeing where people find connections and things, just how you connect, talking about teaching, how you can relate that to something else. I always find that fascinating.
Yeah, and it does, and things all relate, but it's also communication. So everybody, you have to be able to communicate, and that's I think the thing I'm most proud of is I went from being very shy and quiet to being able to communicate with people, and to it's to my advantage that I would be able to learn things from other people and also give them information. But I also retained the introvert part. Is I can very easily go back into being shy and quiet and disappear in a room. So I kind of hang on to that. And that's why, and I mentioned that when I was talking about how I could be in a group of people, and a lot of them, like a very famous rock band, and and be just there with them, and not being a fan, and not being in their face, and not saying, "Oh, I love your latest record," or anything like that. And they were very comfortable. I then became one of them. On the other hand, there are photographers, and I mentioned the photographer Platon and how closely related I am to the way Platon connects with people. There are other photographers like Richard Avedon and Annie Leibovitz. They have a completely different style. They totally manipulate whoever's sitting in front of the camera. They tell them to have empty their mind, don't think of anything, and then they make them think of something.
Yeah.
And they're literally directing them to make certain facial expressions and body language. And it's a whole different way. I mean, I enjoy, both of the work of both of those photographers, and Annie's still working and creating amazing things. So I really love the way, but it's the opposite way of doing things. So they're communicating in the way of commanding attention. And my way of working is to not command attention, is to just be there and be capturing things that happen. And often at the end of a shoot, and people are looking at the work and they're going, oh, wow, these are really great, but how did we get these? You didn't even tell me what to do. and I always tell them the same thing. I said, well, I let you be yourself. I didn't have to. I wanted who you were. I didn't necessarily want a specific character to show up. So I let you be yourself. And sometimes they feel very comfortable and they relax, and then they give me something that another photographer didn't give them. So, that's really kind of fun. So what are you shooting?
I do a lot of, right now for classes, I do a lot of self-portraits, but kind of outside of classes, I really like doing kind of like photojournalism and event type stuff. I've been volunteering with a summer camp for a while for people with Down syndrome, so that's kind of like my passion right now. Yeah.
And you?
I'm in the kind of same area. I shoot a lot of self-portrait as well. I do like still life though, making like scenes with still life, so not just like a vase and like flowers, but like actually making an environment out of still life. I tend to talk about topics that are more like political, so I kind of consider myself to be like an activist with my artwork.
So it's actually really timely. A lot of people are doing self-portraits, and it's really important because then it's people examining themselves and then presenting themselves as not only artwork, it's part of performance art, because what you're doing is you're presenting yourself. But also when you mentioned activism, the generation before you had nothing to be active about. Although, racism has always been there. But now what we started seeing in I guess like the last 4 or 5 years is we've seen this explosion of it, and we've seen this enormous going backwards in society, where we're returning to like the 1950s, where there were signs up whites only, and where women were supposed to just stay in the kitchen and cook, and that's what they were good for, and all of that very old-fashioned way of thinking. And your generation will probably be saving Western culture because of your activism. So I commend you for that. And it's not like older people aren't doing it, but it's nice. It's really nice to see people who, young people who really are active, do and aware. So it's really important. And photography, of course, is one of the things that makes it, that lets other people see your point of view, and also things that they weren't there to see. There was a feature on one of the TV news shows where they talked about war photographers, because we haven't had a war like this one in Ukraine. We haven't had that in the world for a while. And all of a sudden there's people who specialized in war photography, and they had 3 of them on to discuss what they were doing and showing the pictures. And we've all seen news clips, but as much as I really like working in video and I really like moving images, when you see a clip of something happening, it's there and it's gone. But when you see a still image, it's there and you can look at it forever, and you can look really closely, and you could look further away, and you can capture the emotion of the characters in the still picture. So it's very, very important to do that politically, to use your talents and your skill. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. But this is really nice. I'm really glad that we're doing this podcast because it gives me the opportunity to hear your opinions and what you want to know. When I was speaking, I said, "Did anyone have any questions?" And I, got one or two questions. But it's, whenever you're in a situation like that, and you're in a big room, and you go, "Well, if I ask this question, does anyone else want to know that?"
Yeah.
That's usually it. But now we have the opportunity. So, anything else? What else you want to know?
Yeah, I mean, you had kind of touched on it earlier. I know for me, and it might be for Alex as well, you had mentioned about how you used to be, like, really introverted and really, like, shy about approaching people and, like, taking photos. How did you kind of, like, you said you still channeled that to kind of make people at ease and comfortable, but how did you kind of overcome that to start approaching people more and being more involved with the people you're photographing?
That's a really good question. That was the hard work.
Yeah.
There's always work involved, but when you think about what we do, if we shoot pictures, and then if we're using film and you go in the enlarger and you make a print, if you're doing digital and you sit in a computer, it's all kind of enjoyable. It's what we're doing, and we're looking at the pictures that are important to us. It's really enjoyable. So that's not work. I never think of photography, any kind of like photography or even video, as work. Mm-hmm. Because if it's work, I don't want to do it. Unless somebody's paying a lot of money. Yeah. So now in a lot of my career, and I showed that one website with the beauty products, I didn't really enjoy doing that. It was something that I didn't mind doing, but I got paid a lot of money. So that was the motivation for that. So if you're creating work where you're not getting paid at all, it should be enjoyable. So so I went to a 2-year college, and I graduated with an associate's degree in nothing. So it's like, it was just, you went to college, so you got this certificate, and that was what it was. So, but in the second year of that junior college, I got interested in photography. A friend of mine was on the school newspaper, and he said, "Oh, come down, I'll show you how to make pictures." And I'm in the darkroom now. Look, the picture is developing in the tray right in front of my eyes. It was so exciting. And he loaned me a camera, and then I bought a camera, and then I was taking pictures in concerts and things like that. So I said, well, I like doing this, so if I have to do something for a living, I'd really like to do this. Yeah. So I needed to go not to go to another college into a liberal arts program, or to be an English major, or a history major, or math, or no, never mind math, or something else like that. What I would want to do is photography. So I did some investigation, and I ended up applying to SVA and showed my work, and they accepted me. So there I am, and I'm in class, and I'm sitting in the back, and I'm invisible, and I'm saying, I can't do this. Yeah. I have to be here. This is what I chose to do. This is I'm either going to do this or I'm not going to do it. So what I did was I then started sitting in the front of the class. I'm in the front row, and I said, every class that I go to, I have to ask a question, or I have to answer a question. And sometimes I'm shaking, and I'm going, and I'm raising my hand, and I'm asking the question, and I don't even remember the answer because my brain is swirling, and I have no idea what they said, but I asked the question, and that was the big change. That was the difference. So when it came down to the situation that I described, where I had to call a record company, I've always had the problem of being very anxious about picking up a phone and calling someone I've never, doing what they call a cold call. I've never talked to this person before. Literally shaking. The phone is shaking in my hand, and I'm managing to get the words out, and I'm trying really hard to listen to what they're saying. And once I got past that, once I got to the point where this absolutely wonderful human being, Shep Gordon, said to me, "You sound like a nice kid. You can go to the hotel," I realized that I had reached a point. I had broken through. But without that, I probably would have ended up working construction the rest of my life, which I loved doing. Please don't get me wrong, because what I realized was that after I left school and I had a portfolio of pictures, the only thing I could probably do was become someone's photo assistant for minimum wage, 12 hours days. But how do I start a business? So what I did was I had clients in the music business. I got a job as a bricklayer's helper, and that allowed me to do physical work without having to think about anything. Mm-hmm. It was all very simple work, and I worked with great people and I was really strong then too. Oh my God, the physical shape that I was in was fantastic. So what I would do is I would go to the job, I would have a change of clothes and my camera bag with me. At the end of the day, I would take change my clothes, take my camera, get on the subway, and do either shoot a concert or a contract signing or a party, and then drop the film at the lab, and they would develop it and make contacts and bring them to the client, and then go back to work. And I did that for a few years, and then at one point I had so much photography work, I couldn't do the day job, but I had accumulated so much money that I was able to rent an office space or small studio space and be able to live off that until I got enough money from photography in order for it to work. But a lot of it took, I think that was the hard work. The hard work was that breakthrough where, I couldn't be shy anymore. Yeah. No one was coming to get it. And it's the same thing today. No one's coming to find you. You have to present yourself in a situation where hopefully someone will notice you. And we're all fortunate in this time that we have outlets like social media that if you do it right, someone will notice you. And that's pretty much how it works. So I mentioned that once, I didn't mention it to you. I think I talked to Nicole about it. There's one student who in their senior year at SVA, and their work was really, really amazing. And it was all portrait work. And they were told, don't go to the galleries now because, you're too young, you're not ready. Don't go to the galleries. So one of the things I relate to this particular person is that they didn't listen to anybody either. So what they did was they dropped their portfolio off at a gallery in Chelsea called Yossi Milo. And it's a very well-known gallery, very big gallery. And usually what happens is that galleries at certain times will allow people to drop a portfolio. I don't know if they do that anymore, but at the time they were doing that. So they drop the portfolio off, they look at it, and then they call you and tell you come and pick your work up. Because how else will they find new people? Mm-hmm. So the phone rings and they answer the phone and they're looking at the caller ID and it's this gallery, and they were figuring the person was calling to have them come pick their work up, and they said, "Oh, we have to ask, can we start selling this?"
Oh, gotcha.
We started showing this to people, and everyone wants to buy it. So there is that situation where, even the best intentions of this particular teacher to tell you, "Oh, well, you're not ready, don't go," them not listening to it actually started their career. So after that, they ended up not only selling prints. I think they've had gallery exhibitions all over the world, and they ended up. I'm not sure if they went to Yale. I don't really know, but they did go to graduate school, and they're still working now. I think they're doing some sort of a teaching position, and it's just sometimes you don't listen to what people tell you.
Yeah, it seems like it's all about being proactive, just getting yourself out there.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. but that's exactly it. Is the fact that I made that decision. Do you want this really bad? Then just do it. Yeah. And if someone tells you can't, then you can't. Then if you listen to them, you can't. Then they shut you down. Mm-hmm. One of the people that I photographed, it was someone who looked like a rock singer, and she had a microphone, and I had that background that I generated and behind her. Her name is Drea. Mm-hmm. She has a stage name. She calls herself Miss Cherry Delight. She used to be a burlesque artist, and now she is writing and performing her own music. And her Spotify in a year went from 1 or 2 followers to 10,000 followers. And she's doing her own music. And she was told You're too old. What are you bothering for? Don't, why are you wasting your time? And she didn't listen. So, you have to, that's one of the things that I always tell people is listen to everybody and then pick and choose what you're going to actually use on your own. And that also adds a certain level of responsibility. It's all your responsibility. You can't blame anybody else. And when you listen to somebody who has a negative attitude and they shut you down, it's still on you. You can't blame them because you listened to them. Mm-hmm. And if you don't try something, you're guaranteed to fail. You have to try something. And I always tell people take the pictures. If you don't like them, don't show them to anybody. But here's something that happens quite often in all art schools. You're in a critique session, and the teacher or one of the other students is asking you, why did you take this picture? That plants something in the back of your mind. And here's another thing that you have to get past, is if you listen to that enough, what's going to happen when just before you press the shutter, there's something in front of your camera that you find interesting that you would like to share with the rest of the world. Before you press the shutter, something in your head, whether it's conscious or not, is going to say, how will I explain that I took that picture? Mm. And once that interferes with the activity of moving your finger 1/8 of an inch to make the camera fire, you've lost. You've given into something. So when a teacher asks you that, they're asking you that for a valid reason. The reason is they want you to think about how your work, how it works. Like, what are you doing? What does it mean to you? And sometimes the answer is, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a valid answer. And also you could say to the teacher, what does it mean to you? But not in a challenging way, but in an inquisitive way, because you're trying to get an explanation of why you're doing things. But there's all of these things that can shut people down. So when a situation arises where, well, gee, I don't know if I'm going to take this picture. This is not really working. Well, just take it and then worry about it later. Unfortunately, if you're working digitally, it's free. You have a memory card that you can put 3,000 pictures on. So what? Don't show them to anybody. Yeah. And everybody has that. I mentioned that famous photographer who they attribute the decisive moment as if he had some magical skill where he could just capture this microsecond. No, I know someone who used to work at his agency and who used to file his contact sheets back into the files. And he would have like 10 rolls of film of a certain subject. And the decisive moment was when he made the decision on which frame was the one that worked. Yeah. And it's the same thing when I showed those pictures of the rock band where there were, like you saw like 3 pictures. There's a whole strip. I would hold the button down on the camera, and we have that now with our digital cameras. We can do, multiple shots, and then you pick which one works because it's that fraction of a second. So even in my own class, when I give them a particular assignment, and they're working on a project and they have everything set up, and we actually have 3 studios working at the same time. So I go from room to room to make sure everybody's doing what they want, or if they need a particular help or something's not working. And I notice somebody shooting and they shoot maybe, 10 frames, and I'm going, 10 frames? How do you shoot 10 frames? Mm-hmm. It's just like shoot 100 frames. And then if you don't like any of them, don't show them to anybody. Now, there's a photographer who I heard speak many years ago, Helmut Newton. And he's somebody who is on the other end of the spectrum. He's so well established and so sure of what he wanted that it was a slideshow, and he spoke after it, and he opened it to questions. And somebody asked him, how many rolls of film do you use to shoot something like a major major editorial campaign, like something for French Vogue, which would be the cover and maybe 10 pages inside? He said 1.5 rolls. So at that point, we're talking about maybe 50 images. Yeah. And he said, the reason is that because I know exactly what I want. I even tell them how to move what position each finger should be in. But that's what he wanted to do. That's his way of working. I'm sure that he wasn't born that way. He got to the point where he knew exactly what he wanted, and that's what he did. And he's respected for his work. It's really, really gorgeous work. But that's not always what works. Sometimes you have to shoot 920 pictures in order to get what you need. And then as you grow and as you look at your own work and analyze and see what works and what doesn't work, then you don't have to shoot 900 pictures. So I showed the poster of the two comedians that looked like they look like mafia actors. And both of them are actually very funny. And I shot 252 frames, but it was actually 2 setups. So we pretty much knew what we wanted to do, and that included individual pictures of each of them, and we changed the angle, and sometimes they're sitting, and sometimes they're standing back to back. Then we did face to face, and then we did them sitting on these chairs, and we did it. And I was able to do it in 250 pictures, and they were ecstatic. They loved how it worked. I could have shot more, but I thought we got everything we needed. Yeah. So, it was all fine. But if I was doing that shoot 30 years ago, I could think of 50 other things. I just keep shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. And then it gets tiring after a while. Yeah. Then you're just making frames. It's like, what exactly are you going on and on for? Now, I saw that in the commercial world where if I was working for somebody young as an art director, somebody inexperienced, sometimes what they would do is they would say, okay, I'm setting up, we have a background, we have lighting, and we have these, shampoo bottles or whatever they are. And they would say, well, can we, do it from this side and do it from that side? And then can we change the color of the background? Every possible variation that they were thinking of, they would want to do it. And then we look at the clock, and the time is running out. And they knew what they wanted. They had a sketch from probably one of their supervisors or superiors. They had a sketch, and I said, but we've done this. At the time, we would have Polaroids where we do Polaroid testing. So there's a whole wall, a bulletin board full of Polaroids, and I'd say, look, this is it. And often what would happen is we'd continue with the shoot, and then they'd go and look at all of the variations we did, and they go, well, this one worked. I said, well, that was the first one we did. And then they wouldn't believe it. They would say, no, you just put it there. So give me an argument.
Oh.
Yeah, so, all right, what else? What else? I like that you're asking questions. It's hard to carry on a conversation, then it's just me talking. It's better if you tell me what you need to know. I think I like it better that way.
I always feel I run into that where we'll bring someone on, we're like, no, we want to have a conversation, but then I'm just like so fascinated, I forget that I'm supposed to be interviewing someone.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you, like, what did you want to do, and what do you do? So, yeah, so that's good. Let's see, I should interview you. But I did mention this town. I really love this town. My wife and I come here, for vacation all the time. And I found something there was a bookstore down the street. It closed, I think, about 10 years ago. And I found a scrapbook in there. And in the scrapbook were tin-type photographs, which is, an old process. And the person in the photographs was in a vocal group, was a teenage girl in a vocal group, and there were pressed flowers and opera tickets and all kinds of party invitations. And then it suddenly ended. And are you aware of Eric's partner, Stacy?
Just a little bit, yeah.
Okay, so she has something she does where she's a photographer. But she also portrays the role of someone named Sylvia DeWolf Ostrander. And if you go and look on Instagram and type in Stacy Morrison, and you'll see her either portraying this person or going back in history. So now the reason I even bring this up is that when I saw this scrapbook and I saw those photographs and how it captured this time from over 100 years ago. It's from the 1870s or 1880s. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh my God, this is like hundreds of years ago. And it's just frozen in time. And look at how I can go there, and I've never met this person, I never will. And you can see the permanence that's involved in having captured that moment of time. So here we get to the point where we go, well, what's better, a video or a still image? And when I just did talk about the value in war photography of having that still image. So, do you ever replace still images with video? I mean, are you doing video?
Yeah.
Okay. And so what do you feel works better for what you're doing?
I definitely feel like I gravitate more to still image because I think that it gives you a limited amount of time to spend with the photograph. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it kind of is like a segue into talking on something, on having like a bigger conversation about the topic rather than like showing you more, if that makes sense.
So now now a video is a series of still images, no matter what system you're using. It's a series of still images. So you mentioned activism. So I'm assuming that you're in places where there are protests or gatherings where people are talking about certain things. So does the video portray more of the feeling of it? Because what can happen now with video is you can have the audio part of it, and you can hear people chanting, or you could even hear people talking and exchanging ideas or arguing with each other. You can do that with still images. You could show the people in there and read the body language and read what's going on in their faces, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know what they're talking about. Okay, so there's both. So I'm really glad to hear that you do both, because you really need to do both. Are you doing video also?
I do a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very important. I keep telling people that. So when we look at our, I mentioned magazines way back in my conversation or in my talk earlier today. They don't really exist in paper. I mentioned flipping through magazines to figure out what you like. You could still see magazines. They're still around, but they are online. There are magazines that in digital form, they're definitely there, but it's different. It's a whole different way of thinking. But when you look at these magazines that you used to see on paper, when you look at them online and even newspapers, things are moving, because that's what people want to see. And this expansion in streaming services, you've got, I can't even list them all. There's Hulu and Netflix and, Disney Plus and Discovery. Everybody's got a Plus now, and Peacock and all these things. And it's really wonderful for the filmmaking industry and for young people getting into the industry, because you can make, you could make content, or you can contribute to content. But all of that moving imagery has expanded in the need for it. So that's why I always encourage people, is to make things move, even if you're making GIFs, just to have something that's moving will attract more attention. So it comes down to attracting attention. On the other hand, when you're doing fine art and you're doing like something like a gallery exhibition, you want to be able to have people see that and then absorb from the still image as much as they can possibly get. That leads me to, how big do you make your pictures?
Yeah. I feel like I print smaller out of convenience. We do have to like pay for our prints, but I feel like if I were to have any, like, sky is the limit, I would be printing much bigger than I am right now.
Good. What about you?
I think we're kind of in the same boat a little bit. I really love printing really small. Everyone gives me a hard time for it, but I tend to print like smaller than 8.5 by 11. Like, I feel like my images you would probably see a lot more of the detail I put into them if I printed large, but I like just kind of forcing people to get up really close to them. Like, I like having that like one-on-one experience. Well, obviously not myself, like allowing my work to have like that one-on-one experience with somebody.
No, I get the one-on-one because it's the one-on-one. It's the viewer and the image, and they have to get close to it. And if they're close to it, they can't have anyone else looking at it at the same time.
Yeah.
So in that case, I see the validity in it. I see the reason for doing it, and I appreciate that. But also, having been your age and making like, I guess you could call them fine art prints, like when I was in school. And I made them small for the same reason that you're saying. But what I also found is that people like big pictures more.
Yeah. That's fair.
And of course, financially, it's not always possible to do big pictures because it's expensive. So now I have had the opportunity to be at some conventions and expos to show my work. And for some cases, what I would do is I would print no smaller than 16 by 20. And sometimes I would print 2 by 3 feet, like 24 by 36. And it's amazing how people will go and like from the distance, it catches your eye and they'll walk right up to it. And they'll go, how much is this one? Which is the best question. And then you tell them and they walk away. But sometimes does it come with a frame? Well, yeah, the frame is this much more. Okay, I'll take it. But that's the whole, so in the history of fine art photography, if you go to the Museum of Modern, you go to MoMA, and you're looking at older pictures, you're not going to see enormous prints because that's not what people did back then. They did what you're talking about. At a certain point, when photography became more connected to the fine art world in general, sculpture and painting and drawing, what people realized is that they were making larger paintings. From what I understand, I haven't seen it, but the Mona Lisa itself is very small, about the size of like an old-fashioned album cover.
Yeah.
It's really not very big. But if you go to see like a gallery exhibition now of paintings, they're huge. They're 8 feet wide. So now Richard Avedon did this. He traveled across the United States with an 8x10 film camera. And from what I understand, he made this maybe hype, but he supposedly photographed 10,000 frames of film. And when they had the exhibition, the prints were huge. And I don't know if that's the changing point when it happened. But now if you go to an exhibition, you're going to see large prints. Of course, it costs more to produce something like that, but you can sell them for more money. And there's nothing wrong with making money.
Oh, yeah.
I had the opportunity to hear a photographer named Dwayne Michaels speak. And Dwayne Michaels was known he was the one who made sequences popular. He would make a sequence of photographs almost as if it was a narrative from beginning to end. And they usually, his prints weren't very big. A couple of things that he did to make them more valuable. One thing in particular is after he finished with his sequences, he would start to do the narratives in a single image, but by handwriting on the print. So by handwriting on the print, it is now a unique image. It's not even an addition of like 1 out of 50. It's a unique image, the hand of the artist. Sometimes he would paint on them. And his point he made when he was speaking was, why shouldn't I make a lot of money? I want to live well. The starving artist myth is something that needs to die, is that you shouldn't be, struggling is one thing, but starving is a whole other thing. So if there's a way for you to make money, without, of course, compromising your views or morals or anything like that, or doing anything illegal, when the opportunity comes for you to make something that someone could pay a lot of money for, do it. And it's always, I always get the argument, well, how am I going to do that? There's already a lot of people. How am I going to end up doing that? And if you're even speaking about commercial photography, how do I get to the point where someone's going to pay me a lot of money? Well, you need an agent to negotiate for you. The idea being, well, you maybe think you're a great photographer, but if you walk into an interview to present your work, and you tell them how great you are, they're going to think you're a jerk. On the other hand, if someone else takes your work in and tells how great you are, there's automatic approval. There's an automatic, yeah, you're right. Yeah, look at that. Look. So there's that whole difference. Well, how do you get an agent? It's impossible. There's no agents around that are looking for people. Well, how did all those people get there with the agent? How did they do it? It is possible. Whatever appears to be impossible, there's a way to do it. And of course, it's all a matter about exposure and getting yourself into, getting your work seen. And as I mentioned, that one photographer who dropped it off at a gallery. It's possible. It takes persistence. It takes that drive, and just remembering no one's going to hand it to you. You have to go get it.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about like NFTs and video and large prints and like all these ways things are kind of heading towards. And you've been in the industry for a while. Like are those kind of like where you think photography and like art in general is like heading towards? Like,
well, I've never sold like large fine art prints. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm not in that world. But in the commercial world, I've done assignment work, and I also mentioned, in fact, Eric asked me to mention stock photography. And for many years, stock photography was very lucrative. It was a situation where these photographs exist, and they have specific like tags that go along, or we call it metadata. So they have metadata tags, and someone's looking for a picture of a sunset, with a sailboat. Then what they could do is go to an agency and type in sunset, sailboat, blue ocean or whatever, or even a specific location, a certain island, and the images would come up, and then they would license them. Well, now you say take that picture with your phone. So that part of the stock photography is kind of going away. So agencies like Getty have gone from selling or licensing existing images. In other words, like people would pay a certain amount to use it for a certain use for a certain amount of time. And now what's happening is I am getting emails from them, and what they're doing is they're saying, this company is looking for this kind of picture, that company's looking for another kind of picture. So they're back to the situation where they're looking for original photographs, yeah, or original video, as opposed to, because what was happening sometimes in the stock business is a client would license a picture, and then their competitor would license the same picture.
Gotcha.
So there would be that confusion with the two things, unless of course the agency said, oh, do you want this exclusive? That's a whole other thing. But that whole world is changing. So I counted on that for many years as a way of income. And I did mention that I have 3 contracts with them. So the creative stills, where I would photograph like a mailbox or an apple or a bowl of blueberries or things like that, that's kind of falling apart. There's really very little money in that. The video clips that I make, some of them are as short as 5 seconds. They're no longer than 20 seconds. And sometimes they are, like piano with a microphone, or, so that I showed you the Coast Guard boat going in there, and those are making money. So there's still money in that because there's a certain amount of originality in those. And the old stuff that I have, all the old rock pictures, those are still selling because sadly people die that are in my pictures, and they have, they get licensed those pictures, so I'm making money that way. So what's the next thing? So we keep mentioning NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And I have no idea what they're going to do. There are people who have sold their NFTs for millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So in fact, I was talking to my wife about it and trying to explain to her what it is. And it was on one of the blockchains, one of the sites that has the NFTs on it. And we're looking at this drawing. It's an animation of someone walking, like a cartoon character. And at the time, it was offered on auction. It was $13,000. Mm-hmm. So if it cost that person in fees, because they have fees that are involved in it, listing it, transfer fees, et cetera, if it costs a couple of $100, maybe $200 or $300 to get those, to get that where it's being offered, but you're getting $13,000, you're making money. So I'm exploring whether or not that's another way to go. I will still be contributing things to Getty as far as video goes. So some of the things that you saw with the cubes and the red, green, and blue, that stuff will ultimately, when I find the time to edit and get it uploaded, then that will be sitting there. Hopefully somebody will want something really colorful. But where is everything else going to go? I don't know. When you're talking about an NFT that doesn't exist, or it exists but only in digital form. It's not like a comic book. It's not like a baseball card or an autograph, or even like a first edition of a book that has the author's autograph in it. It's not like that. You could hold those things. Something that's like a digital token not only doesn't exist, but other people can have it. They can not download it, but they can screenshot it or somehow make copies of it. They don't own it. And really what it comes down to is a form of art that's about currency. It ends up being money. So it's how does this translate to like reselling? It's really all about reselling. It's not about appreciating a piece of art. It's like when someone's looking at it. So let's take existing artists. Let's take a famous painter that's still alive and still producing. So their paintings sell for $100,000. So when you have an NFT by them, and you're bidding on it, you're very comfortable bidding on it because the idea is that once you own it, you can then offer it for sale again, and someone else can then bid more money, and then you can, you get whatever that increase in profit. Some of the way these NFTs work is the way you do it is you can actually get a commission from every sale after that. So that's what attracting people who don't care about art, they don't care about photography, they only care about money. Yeah. When you take, for example, cryptocurrency, the most famous one is Bitcoin. I don't know what the value is when it started many years ago. I can assume that maybe a Bitcoin was $1. Bitcoin is $40,000 per Bitcoin. Yeah. So 20 years ago, however many years ago, if you had bought 1,000 Bitcoins, that's $4 million. Yeah. But what happens when everybody decides it's not worth anything?
Yeah.
Then you don't have anything. So I don't know. That's the mystery. That's the mystery of that whole NFT thing. But like anything, I'm going to try it and see. I learned all about it on YouTube. I typed in how to make an NFT, and I watched a bunch of videos, and then I went to we have YouTube. We can find out anything. How to change a light bulb on your Chevy. How to change a faucet in your bathroom sink. You could find out anything, but you could also find out a lot about photography. What you can't do, because I've had people do this. They say, "Oh, I saw this tutorial about how this lighting worked, and when I tried it, it didn't work." Mm-hmm. Well, in that case, it helps to have someone advise you. Say, "Okay, well, this is what they did here, and this is what they did there." Unfortunately, what we find is that the picture that's the finished picture, the way that they did it in the video, you can't get that picture from that. So I've seen that too, but I don't know what's next. Yeah. I wish I could tell you.
I mean, it seems like based on everything you said, it's just trying everything and anything.
I think that what's really important is to keep in touch with whatever's happening in the world. Super important. Yeah. Because if you're not paying attention, if you're relying on what you know, so the term expert, and people sometimes will say, "Oh, let's ask Len. He's the lighting expert in the school." And I go, "No, please don't use the word expert." Because what the problem with being an expert knows this thing, and that's what they're expert at. They don't know what happens tomorrow. They don't know what they don't ever expand on what they're doing, because it takes the value away from their title as expert. So all I think of myself is, yeah, well, I know a lot, but what's that thing? I want to know what is that thing. I want to know what that thing is, and I want to know what this thing is. I want to know what all these things are. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
You're still like learning, even at a certain age. That's what my parents always say.
All the day, every day.
Yeah.
You learn something if you pay attention. But that also sometimes takes a little bit of courage, because you may be learning things that, let's see, how would I explain it? You're learning things that your friends your age have no clue about. And you can't even talk to them about it. So in that case, it takes a certain amount of courage to say, oh, well, I'm going to figure this out. I don't care if there's nobody. They don't know what that is. You just have to keep going. But even in general, in life, as your parents said, you learn things every day. But the world forces you to do that. Now, we live you live in an area where there are people who are living in the 1800s. The Amish still think it's 1873. And, I respect a lot of what they do, and the fact that they're really dedicated to that way of life. And in New York City, what we have a lot of Hasidic Jews, and they are also living in a certain period of time with a certain societal structure. And I have a lot of respect for that. But we're not there. We're not those people. We're living in this modern world where things are changing every day. And I always encourage people to find out whatever it is. If things are different, somebody mentions something, go find out what it is. And you have that advantage. You go to Google and you type in, and the most fun thing is to watch the bar where it starts filling in. When you type in what is, and it's so much fun to see what pops up. And it's the thing that people ask the most, and sometimes it's just fun to do that.
Yeah.
Just to see what people are asking about. And sometimes it's about a Kardashian or it's like Kanye West. It's like whatever's happening in the news, like a lot of gossip, and people want to know the size of someone's engagement ring, or when is the new Batman movie coming out? I think it just came out. And we talked about moving images, and we talked about the digital world. In filmmaking now, movies like Batman, and my favorite character is Venom. I love Venom. I love Venom because Venom is funny and also evil at the same time. So he's in this poor guy. He's living in this guy who I think is really a victim, and that Venom just does whatever they want, and this guy has to pay for it or has to endure it. But what we're looking at doesn't exist. It's all computer generated. Not all, but a lot of it is computer generated. And then what are we watching? We're watching a video game, or we're watching a cartoon.
It is always so interesting to see, I'll see images of how it looked before, and it's just an actor sitting in a completely green room, and they've completely generated a whole scene around them.
And they generate the whole thing. Now there's an artist, I believe his name is Ian Spriggs, Spriggs, and if you go to his Instagram account, you're going to see these beautiful photographic portraits of people that never existed.
Oh,
he completely draws them from scratch. Wow. And he shows you their framework, and he shows you how he fills in, and it's absolutely amazing. So if I was thinking about the future, okay, if I was in school now, I might want to be doing that.
Yeah.
I might want to be doing that, or I might want to be doing the computer-generated filmmaking. Okay, I mean, I'm not at the point where I would want to do that now, but thinking if I was starting over, I might be interested in doing that. But then again, we're talking about something where I had a student who in our school we do people do cross specialties. In other words, I had a computer art major come and take my studio photo class. So there's one particular guy, Ray, a very talented photographer and filmmaker now. I'm talking to him because he's from the computer department, and he's the one who told me about this Ian Spriggs. And I said to him, well, how do you render an image like that? How big is the computer? He said, the one we have is about the size of a refrigerator. And what you do is after you've done everything, all your work, and you hit render, which is, usually like enter or okay. You hit render, you go home and come back the next morning to see what it looked like. Because it has to take all of those pieces and assemble everything and put it all together. So in that case, that's another expense. It's another thing. But, so to get involved in a program like that would be kind of fun to do. But you have to want to do that. Now, I've known people who were, not that long ago, there was a reality show, a competition show called Face Off. Oh, you guys know it?
It sounds familiar, I think.
Yeah, so what they did was they had makeup artists who would create these characters, and then they would judge them, and it's almost like the way they do like Master Chef or any of those shows. And someone would be the champion. And I had someone I met who was on that show and really doing the most amazing work. But a lot of that work went away because it's being done digitally. They take they take a person, and everything around them is just generated. It's not really real. So I would be interested in doing that if I was young. But then I would have to also be drawn to it. It's like, can I draw? Am I interested in doing like artwork in that way? So, thinking back, maybe if this was now and I was you, I probably would play with it to see what it was about. And you can do it. I think there's a software called Blender that you can get, and you can play with it. I would probably do that, and then maybe if I'm actually thinking not as if I'm you, but if I'm you, I would do that. I personally would play it. I'm not telling you to do it, but I certainly would play with it and see what it was doing. That's all a matter of being aware of what's out there and what's going on, what's next. Yeah. But you never know what's going to be next. You never know what's going to be next.
That's one thing. PCAT has recently started offering, like Eric mentioned it earlier, minors and like allowing students to take courses in other classes, which I think is kind of like that. Like it's really encouraging. Because I know you mentioned Blender. I know a lot of the animation students we have work with that a lot. Yeah, it's really important to jump across to another major and see what they're doing. And sometimes what happens is now I mentioned this one particular student, Ray, who ended up, instead of being a computer artist, he ended up doing learning studio lighting, and then he took some video classes. And now he has, after graduation, he has his own video production company. And he has hired people to do the computer art, and he's hired people to do but he's also doing a lot of the video shooting and a lot of the still shooting. But they're doing production and marketing. It's great. So you never know. It's all a matter of you have to find out what you want to do. But also what you enjoy.
But try everything.
Yeah.
Because I keep saying if it's not fun, it's work. It's like when you get up in the morning and you have to go to the job, or even if you're working for yourself at home, you have to sit in front of the computer and it's like, I don't want to do this. Then that's not what you should be doing. You should be doing something else. Have you had that experience where you're working on a project, and it could be just working in the darkroom, making prints. It could be sitting and retouching on Photoshop, and you look at the clock and it's like, what? I sat down at 3:00 in the afternoon. It's 2:00 in the morning. Then that's what you should be doing. But then you have to get up. You have to rest your eyes. You have to stretch a little bit, because sitting at the computer, I sit at the computer a lot. I'm at the computer a lot, and it's exhausting. But again, if I really get into a project and I'm working on it, The time just goes by. It really does, especially video editing.
Yeah.
Because I can do, if I'm working on something, even something as short as 20 seconds, I can keep going over and I'll trim a little bit here and I'll play with something here, play with the color, change it here and there, and you get involved in it, and then all of a sudden you look at the clock and go, oh, okay. Time has gone by.
I feel like you've answered so many of my questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're good?
Yeah.
I think
I'm
so.
good. This was really fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you
I
so
really,
much.
I really enjoyed it.
This was excellent. I don't even know how to express how grateful we are. You're actually the first person we've been able to bring in person.
Oh, I know. Isn't that fun? Oh God, it's so different.
Mm-hmm. There's like such a difference at being able to like talk to you and see you in person than like having you just like on a tiny little screen.
Yeah, it's much more connective than it is when you're online and you feel so disconnected from that person, even when you're trying to.
It is. Having taught on Zoom like for a whole year, and then meeting those people, I call them my Zoom heroes because of what they did, and they produced really amazing work, working on their own, and we're wearing masks in our school too. So I saw somebody this big on Zoom. Do I recognize them? and I go, Adam Harris? No, I'm Jill. Oh God. It's like, oh, everybody says we look alike. Well, from here to here. Yeah, so it's really nice being back in person. I can't wait till we get rid of the masks. I have a funny mask story. So we do certain assignments. We don't have models. We're learning a certain technique. Then students are in the pictures themselves. So I go, as I said, I have 3 rooms. I go from room to room. I go back into one room, and there's 2 people sitting on the seamless. And I'm going, oh, somebody had one of their friends drop by, which we do all the time. You know, people can just drop by. So we have somebody drop, their friends by. I turn around and I turn and go, oh, she's in the class. I never saw her from here to here.
It's so,
without a mask.
Bizarre how different people look just without the mask.
So different.
Yeah.
Looks so different. It's so funny. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And things are quiet, and you know, it seems like COVID is. I'm looking forward to not talking about it.
One can only hope.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it's almost over. But this has been great.
Yeah,
Thank you so much
again.
for having me.